Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it. My name's Scott Palsgrove. I run cloud sales here at DataBank. I've been at DataBank now for 7.5 years, but doing this for, I don't know, I was thinking about this morning, and it's closer to 3 decades than 2 decades. But really excited to be presenting today our new platform strategy.
And Autumn?
Awesome. Good day, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, I guess, depending on what time zone you're in. My name is Autumn Salama. I'm the Vice President of Cloud Operations here at DataBank, and that means that my team is responsible for the care and feeding of all of our compute, storage, virtualization, and uh, data protection products. And I can't quite claim 3 decades. I'm about 2 decades in here, and I am really excited after all of the changes that have been happening in the industry with virtualization providers and the component market and AI. Really want to, I'm excited to share with you guys where we're heading with infrastructure.
And I am Dennis Wilson, Senior Vice President of Account Management and Carrier Sales. I've been with DataBank for just over 10 years, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time out. And Scott, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dennis. Appreciate that. And also, what I'd like to do is just thank everybody for being here, right? We know that your time is extremely valuable, and we are really appreciated and honored that you're going to spend it with us today. And I really want to kick off this webinar by obviously, the name of the webinar is Choice is the New Enterprise Strategy, and it's never been more relevant than right now, right? Obviously, we know you guys as IT professionals, you have a huge job, and there's a lot of risk involved in that job, and it's a difficult job because no one thanks you when everything it goes right, and everyone calls you when things are going wrong. And we certainly understand that. And that's how we think about it, as being a partner with you guys as an extension of your team. And so what I did is I took a few minutes to put just a quick slide together, because we know that there is really two major headwinds going on that are relatively new. Right, we know the first headwind really is equipment costs have really spiked. I don't know if you guys have gotten some updates on what the equipment costs these days, but it's 3 to 4 times more expensive than it was just 120 days ago. And that is really difficult to navigate, because your job never stops, and now it's more difficult to do it because it's harder to justify those added expenses. And the other side, obviously, which you guys are all very familiar with, I'm sure, is the Broadcom disruption with regard to VMware. And so what I really did is I wanted to put together some bullet points that we have heard from our customers, that we have spent a lot of time designing around, to hopefully be a good partner in and offer solutions that really drive the next generation, or the next generation of your infrastructure. And so we say here the new era of enterprise infrastructure decision making is really driven by the dynamic increase in equipment costs, the uncertainty about the best next step for your infrastructure strategy. And it's true, because there's a lot of options. What do we know that enterprises or we know that people like to do what they like to do because it's proven and it works and it's low risk, right? But in some cases that's being challenged today. There are, other people in the business saying, look, we have to figure out how we're going to move forward, maybe with a different strategy. We're evaluating whether moving workloads off hyperscalers could reduce cost, right? Obviously trying to fit things in within a budget. Feeling the pressure of ongoing VMware licensing increases. I don't have to tell you guys, we've seen that too, as being a large VMware licensing provider on our cloud platforms. And that's causing pressure also to look at different platforms, or figuring out ways of, optimizing the existing platform to hopefully lower, keep spend within something that's palatable. We're comparing alternate hypervisors such as KVM-based Proxmox, Verge.io, maybe Hyper-V, Nutanix. We know that those are relatively, new projects for our customers and for the industry. Struggling to properly test alternatives without access to lab equipment. We talk about that all the time. Like, we want to try these different virtualization platforms, but you don't necessarily have gear to be able to do that, right? So we know that that potentially is a struggle for you guys, right? And trying to manage vendor lock-in, contract expiration. You know, a lot of enterprise workloads and a lot of our customers and a lot of our prospects, you know, they've got 6 and 7 and 8 different contracts that they have to manage and maintain for the solution that they have, and it's very difficult to get them all to line up properly to be able to modernize their environments. And then finally, challenged challenge to align IT strategy with budget, CapEx and OpEx shifts. We know that these are challenging times with regard to that, and everybody's trying to optimize their environments because obviously equipment has gotten really expensive, and so has the number one adopted hypervisor out there, right? And so we're sensitive to this. We've built a platform to deal with a lot of these questions and issues, and we're really excited to show you what we've put together. So kind of going to the next slide here is really a poll. And so a poll should be popping up on your screen. And poll number 1 here, and we have 4 polls today, is what is your number one cloud-related concern? Is it rising infrastructure costs? Is it hypervisor licensing cost increases? Is it security and compliance pressures? We know that's a big one. Is it vendor lock-in? We're kind of stuck doing what we're doing because we're stuck in a contract. We're stuck with a certain technology. We bought into an ecosystem that is now gone up in price rapidly, and performance unpredictability. If things used to be great, and now we're having trouble. We're having trouble with reliability. So we're excited to hear what your number one cloud-related concern is. So moving on to the next slide, I wanted to take just a second to talk about some history here. And this is another one of those semi-depressing slides for me where we say, how did we get here? And we talk about how we have this massive tailwind. And in 1998, VMware was really created. It was the first, it's not really the first hypervisor, but it was the first hypervisor that really took hold of the market. And when I say it's depressing is because a lot of times when I'm doing this live in a room with a bunch of people and I ask them if they remember that, I find that 1/3 of the people in the room weren't born yet, right? So, but I remember it vividly, and you guys probably do too. And it was interesting because it was really disruptive in the beginning. And it was disruptive because if you guys remember, it was every single machine was its own physical, every single service was its own physical machine. Think about web servers. They were all individually. Database servers were all individual servers, and domain controllers, all individual servers. And we had racks and racks and racks of servers that basically slept all day. And that was the reason VMware was really created, to create these virtual servers to be able to better utilize and optimize that, the compute in those racks. And that was disruptive to the hardware manufacturers. I remember Dell and HP and IBM, they didn't do so well for so long because people were doing more with less, right? And obviously over the next 20 years or so, there was this tremendous ecosystem that was built. All the software packages that we know and love today. Think about Veeam, think about Zerto, think all of the software that is supported if running on VMware by the manufacturers, and so that ecosystem really grew. And then in 2023, Broadcom bought VMware and started to really consolidate. And we know that their first move was to consolidate out of perpetual licenses and move to a per core model. And that caused a lot of problems. Not only was the CFO upset about that stuff, but also, the IT infrastructure might have not been optimized for a per core model license, right? And so that caused a lot of heartburn for sure. And this is really the beginnings of turning this fantastic tailwind into a pretty strong blowing headwind, right? And then in 2024, Broadcom decides that they're going to start consolidating the reseller program, and that caused problems. If your MSP was reselling you licenses or whatever it might be, now they can't anymore. And so that started to cause disruption. And then we roll into present time. And what happened, obviously present time, licensing is getting more and more expensive. And equipment costs have exploded. And these are massive headwinds that have been pushing on you guys and look, at the end of the day, we certainly can kick the can for some period of time, right? There's certainly life in a lot of people's infrastructure. The question is how much life and what is the risk in pushing that infrastructure's lifespan past where it's supported and so on and so forth. And do we think that equipment costs and licensing is a short-term phenomenon, and DataBank doesn't. We believe that licensing, or we believe that equipment costs are going to remain elevated for a good period of time, and we also don't see any relief in sight with regard to Broadcom changing their mind around their consolidation efforts towards their largest customers. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, let's start first by just talking about DataBank just really quick. Now, I know that a lot of people on this webinar today are DataBank customers already, but what I really want to do is just put some cement in the foundation that we're going to build on top of. And obviously, DataBank has been around for a long time. We're like 100 years old in .com years, right? Founded in 2005 here. We have 70 plus data centers. I say 70 plus because we're adding them so fast. We're pulling them out of the ground so quickly I lose track. But we are the largest privately held data center company in the US, right? With regard to number of locations and data centers. So so scale is in our favor for sure. But what I think is most important, what I love most about DataBank is this future proofing of platforms, the concept of, innovating up and through the stack to take care of our customers for life, no matter where they are in their journey. And this really is what we're going to focus on today, because I believe that there's a lot of byproducts of being able to do this that help you guys with budget and stability and risk. We have 3,500 customers. These are all the hyperscalers. These are the 5 largest banks in the world. They're all the new neo clouds. And if you don't know what a neo cloud is, think GPU as a service cloud. Think CoreWeave and Lambda and those kinds of people. It's people who put stuff in space. It's F1 racing teams. It's the big oil and gas, big hospitals, all the way down actually to your small mom and pops that just buy a couple of servers or resource pool on our self-managed cloud. Right, and then we're super well capitalized to continue to build these data centers and build the cloud and take care of our customers for life. And that's really what it's all about. So what I really want to talk about is this slide here. And we're going to drill down into this slide. And what we call this slide is Platform DataBank, Data Center Evolved. And the reason why we call it that is because it is a true platform, right? We talk about this slide in 2 different ways. The first way we talk about it is, DataBank's not just a colo provider. And we're not just a bare metal provider. We're not just a self-managed cloud provider. And we're not just a managed cloud provider. We're all of it. Along with having a fantastic disaster recovery as a service, right? And we're all of it. It's all stitched together. And what we also then do is we enable spend portability across all of the pillars and through all the pillars. So one of the strategies that we found with our customers that are really helping them meet their budget demands is that a lot of times people will create they'll contract their term based on the solution itself. So think about like if you have, let's say you have let's say you have 3 years left on your machines, on your servers, and you're going to go into a data center. Well, you're probably going to pick a 36-month contract because you don't know what you're going to do after those machines are 5 years old, and you're going to retire those machines. I don't know. You're going to go to the cloud, or you're going to refresh your rack, or you're going to do some hybrid scenario. You don't know, so you commit to 3 years, and that gives you some discounting over an annual term, but not as much as maybe a 5-year term or a 7-year term. And so what DataBank allows is, because we allow customers to literally shift spend across all of these tiers, what it enables you to do now is to set the term based on the relationship, right? So it allows you to commit longer, knowing that your risk is very low because we can go where the puck is going with you, and now you can enjoy a lower cost from day one, rather than taking a 24-month term and renewing 3 times, right? And you've paid a lot of money for that insurance of being able to leave every 24 months, So this is enabling us to help our customers hit their budget demands and needs, and lowering the risk at the same time. The next way we talk about this slide is really when we try to dial in and what's interesting to our customers, right? Because we get prospects calls all the time. I want this, I want that. But then they change their mind potentially once they understand the full toolbox. And how we really talk about this slide is we talk about what is infrastructure. And what you guys probably know is, if I ask one of you what infrastructure is, you're going to give me one answer. And if I ask somebody else, they give me a totally different answer. And why is that? Well, it's that way because everybody's in a different spot within their journey. So if you think about that, where if you have a bunch of stuff in a data room that you guys manage and maintain, what's infrastructure to you? I don't know, a UPS, maybe a generator, some front door security, a couple of cooling units, that kind of thing. But ultimately, once you move stuff into a public data center like DataBank, well, you guys know the infrastructure then is anything inside that big metal box we call a cabinet. You don't care about, you don't really care about cooling and front door security and power. DataBank does that for you. But then we have customers say, look, I got to get out of the server and storage business. These things are ticking time bombs waiting to destroy my vacation. And oh, by the way, these servers have gotten really expensive. I just need a server or a group of servers, where I need them, when I need them, and for how long I need them. And as long as I have access to the BIOSes and the disk infrastructure, I can upload my own secret sauce, build my own platforms, and do what I need to do. I can buy them on monthly terms, month-to-month terms. I can buy them on 5-year terms. It doesn't, or anything or anywhere in between. And there's no rules. I can put anything I want on these, right? That's DataBank Metal. But then we have customers say, DataBank, we just need a little bit more help. We don't want to deal with the server storage and this virtualization layer is trying to kill us, whether it's the licensing costs or complexities, or we just don't want to patch this stuff anymore. We don't want to be in charge of the virtualization layer because we think the real value is in just being able to create our virtual servers. We want a big resource pool that is on a multi-tenant, high availability, highly available cluster, or dedicated private cluster. And just give me an orchestration layer that I can learn quickly or already know how to use. And that's our self-managed cloud. And then we have our managed cloud. That's for customers to say, look, I don't want to deal with anything that doesn't move my business forward, and that lives in the application and data layer. I don't want to deal with the storage, the servers, the virtualization, and these operating systems. I don't want to deal with the patching, the backups, the monitoring, but I do want all that stuff to stream up to a portal in real time where I can see exactly what's going on in probably a level of detail that's greater than I have today. And oh, by the way, I need full access to all of it because I want this co-managed where I can actually make changes in the operating system and add applications and do that kind of stuff. And also, I forgot to tell you, Scott, that we have to deal with FedRAMP or CMMC or PCI or HIPAA. And if you guys could make that easy for us, that would be great. And ultimately, probably lower costs because you're doing it at huge scale. You'd be a great partner then. And that's our managed cloud. And what's great about this whole stack is it's all stitched together because it's very rare that we find a customer that fits into any one of these pillars perfectly. We always have, like, our self-managed and managed customers, they always have something they want to bring with them. Maybe they have a brand new set of Palo Alto firewalls they got last year. Maybe they have a Velo cloud that has a physical concentrator attached to it. Maybe they have an AS400 or Rubrix, or it doesn't matter. It's all on the same network. We can make it all work together as one. So our toolbox gives us tremendous power to build something special for you guys. Now, disaster recovery as a service, you'll notice it's not a pillar. It's not a pillar because it is a methodology. We use the entire toolbox to build something that is specific to your recoverability needs and your compliance needs. And it's fully managed, it's integrated, tested. We write the run books, we do all of that stuff. So we become a fantastic partner and ultimately the easy button in your disaster recovery as a service needs. So this is the DataBank toolbox. And so what I really want to do is I want to drill down on these pillars here. Right. And I'll tell you, up until 2 years ago, we were 100% powered by VMware. And it was fantastic. You know why it was fantastic? Because we're immediately capable and compatible with you guys, right? You're likely running VMware. And if you're looking at our multi-tenant or dedicated private clouds, it's a known entity. You guys love VMware, you understand how to use it, you're probably certified in it, and basically it was a like for like conversion. So a lot of confidence and comfort was created up until 2 years ago, right? And then we realized that we had to do something different. We needed to offer more choice to our customers because our customers, we believed in 2026 was going to be a rough year for them because 2025 wasn't super simple, right? So what we did is we built this. Right? This is where we say choice is the new enterprise strategy, lower risk, lower cost, higher control, and no lock-in. And so what we did is we brought on Nutanix as a managed platform. We brought on Proxmox as a managed platform. And then what we did is we created this slide here. And this slide is actually pretty interesting because it is a pros and cons. If you think about Proxmox here, it is the cheapest way or lowest cost way to provide enterprise workload to the business. And all the way over here and gaining ground quickly is VMware at the least cost efficient way, right? And this gap is continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Except it's not that simple, right? We have already established that VMware is the OG, right? They've been around for the longest. So what have they amassed? They have amassed the broadest third-party integrations, right? Everybody's built to that platform. And what we know about, our enterprises and even DataBank is that we don't do anything without support. At the end of the day, we have support on everything: the network, the hardware, the hypervisor layer, the operating system layer, and the major software applications that run on that stack, right? Really important. It's the backstop by having manufacturer support and software support on things. What's the polar opposite of that? Well, over here, Proxmox, right? Has the least third-party integration, except it's gaining ground very quickly, right? You've already seen Veeam now supports Proxmox. You've seen a few other backup companies do that now. Cohesity now supports it, and everybody else will support it very quickly because they see where the puck is going. And then we have Nutanix. Nutanix kind of sits, I have it in the middle here, but it's not in the middle. It's much closer to here. It sits right next to VMware with regard to cost and also third-party enterprise support. So another thing that we want to do is we want to change the narrative. When we talk with enterprises, very often enterprises will use the word or. It'll be like, so an example of that will be, we're going to use VMware, or we're going to use Nutanix, or we're going to use Proxmox, or we're going to use bare metal, or we're going to use Colo, or we're going to use a hyperscaler. The problem with or is it's very limiting and restrictive. What if we could just change the word or to the word and, where now it flows better? I'm going to use VMware and Nutanix and Proxmox and bare metal and Colo and AWS and Azure. So what happens now is we have a much bigger and broader toolbox where we can solve bigger problems. Maybe problems that aren't necessarily technology problems, but fiscal problems. And how do we do that? Well, what we do is because they all sit on the same network and we have consistent networking, security, and support, we can blend them all together. And that allows us to create this choose what fits model. It gives the enterprises the flexibility to run the right workloads on the right hypervisors without disruption, re-architecture, or lock-in. Now I know it. You guys are saying, okay, great. That sounds all fantastic, Scott, and almost maybe too good to be true. But why don't you show me exactly how this works and why it's so compelling? And so, fine. What we did, we actually put this slide together based on a real customer that we're working with right now. In fact, we're hoping to get the sales orders back here before the end of the month. This is a gas company. They came to us, and like you guys, they're getting their Broadcom notifications around what their new licensing is going to cost. And they came back to us and they say, hey, DataBank, we're kind of in trouble. We just got our Broadcom renewal and it is way more expensive than we have budgeted, and we need to figure it out. We know that you guys have VMware in your cloud, and we think because you're optimized, likely because you do this every day, we probably can get a better price from you. And we said, well, great, send us your RV tools. And obviously you guys know what RV tools is, the inventory of your virtual servers. And they send it over. And I said, great, I'll get you a VMware quote and also maybe our Proxmox quote. And they said, that's great. By the way, DataBank, we're going to Azure and AWS to quote this out too. And I said, great, I'll work on that with you. I'll work on that also with you. And so we pulled a solution together, and you can see right here, Proxmox is $10,000 a month. You got Nutanix at $15,900. You've got VMware at almost 18 or 80% more. You've got Azure sitting here at $16,600, which is 67% more than Proxmox. And you've got AWS at 85% more. It actually the most expensive option at $18,400. And so what do? We present what we can present and what we control, which is VMware and Proxmox, to this gas company. And they say, DataBank, we love this. This makes a lot of sense. We love this VMware solution you guys put together, except we don't have $18,000 a month to spend. And I said, well, that's good. That's why I gave you the Proxmox solution, because at the end of the day, why would you buy VMware if you could put this all in Proxmox? And, I'm sure your budget is at least $10,000. And they said, it's actually more than that. That's a fantastic price for this, except we have to use VMware. And I said, well, tell me more. And they said, well, it's actually really simple, Scott. We have this ERP system that is only supported by the vendor if it's running on VMware, Azure, and AWS. I said, well, wait a minute, but it'll run on anything. They're like, yeah. I said, okay, I fully understand that. Well, let me show you the magic of Platform DataBank. And so what we did is we put this together. You notice the combined solution sits here, 430 vCPUs, 85 machines, to almost 2 terabytes of RAM. But you'll see over here on VMware, we put 10 Windows servers here because that happens to be their ERP system. So let's keep the ERP system on a supported platform for the vendor, and let's move all the other stuff over to Proxmox here. And now you can see the combined cost is 12.2. Yeah, it's not 10 and it's not 18. It's 12.2, or 31.88% less expensive than if it was all sitting on VMware. So what this allows customers to do is to mix and match to create the perfect solution, both technically and fiscally. And it starts the process of getting away from VMware, right? Which is ultimately going to get more and more and more expensive, which we're going to talk about. So how did we get here? Like, how did we come up with this? Well, I want to tell you, oh, I forgot I made that happen like that. I want to tell you just a quick story. And I think it's a really interesting story. 2 years ago, we do these things with, our CEO is fantastic, and he brings everybody together. He calls it the L1, L2 event. And this was probably 2 years ago or so. And I'm up on stage talking about the health of, our cloud practice and sales and things like that. And our CFO, another fantastic guy named Kevin Ulis, asked me point blank, he says, Scott, what's the biggest risk we have to our cloud practice today? And it was like a softball because Broadcom just had canceled the licensing with the perpetual licensing and caused those kind of problems. I said, Kevin, that's easy. I said, we are 100% tethered to the most hated company on planet Earth, which is Broadcom, and we need to figure that out. So then what happened is we obviously put a lot of effort into figuring it out. And I said to them, I said, look, what I want to do is I want to go to all of our customers because they're really smart, and I want to go to all of our prospects, and I want to go to we have a monster channel network that we spend a lot of time in, and I want to get an understanding of what customers are worried about. Like, what do they fear? Because I don't want to build something that I think is cool. I want to build something that solves real problems. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a narrative around it, and then what I need you to do is really make that real. Take this narrative and build products and services around it that make the narrative real. And that's what we've done. And that's what we came out with in late 2025. We call it Platform DataBank. And so I want to go over a couple of these because I think if I were to poll you guys, this probably would all be accurate. So we say here, we're stuck on VMware, right? Well, great. Let's start with VMware. And we just say here, don't panic. With DataBank, you have time and options. We're ready with alternatives when you are, and we can help replatform, do a full replatform or a partial replatform. Remember, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be an and, right? We're worried about replatforming during migration. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot going on. It's a lot of risk there. We got to move it to someplace else and change the underlying hypervisor on all these virtual servers, right? That's not trivial. Right? We agree. Let's start like for like, and then migrate you to a new platform if we even want to. Maybe it's working great on VMware, and the budget will sustain it today, right? We say with this strategy, this strategy controls and compartmentalizes risk, and we have a team that can do both for you, right? So we're reducing that risk. What if Broadcom continues to raise licensing rates? Well, here's the truth of it, guys. They're going to. Right? At the end of the day, they're going to continue to raise rates in an effort to serve their largest customers. They just are, right? And so what we say here is when you have choice, you have options. This creates flexibility and a path forward and a lowering of risk to your enterprise, right? We like to say here, our current provider does not offer other managed hypervisor options. Look, I was in that position 2 years ago. I fully understand the stress there. Right? And we say choice is key. And this is analogous. I like to kind of, to visualize this. Imagine that you're going down a one-way, a one-lane road, and you're doing 70 miles an hour. And because that road is under construction, there's no, there's no runoff points. There's no shoulders, right? And the person in front of you slams on the brakes. What happens? Well, you meet that airbag, you crash that car, right? But what if you were on a 3-lane highway? Well, maybe you can swerve into the other lane and not crash the car, right? So that's why we say, platform DataBank is a lower risk option by future proofing what's next. We give you choice, right? The main theme today is choice, and choice always lowers risk, right? Equipment costs are becoming unattainable, triple in the last 90 days, right? We know that's a problem. So what we've done is we've used our scale to provide both physical servers on metal, right, to allow you guys to do whatever you want to do and turn that CapEx into OpEx, right? And then we offer virtual servers on 3 different managed hypervisor platforms to give you more choice. And we say here, if you buy equipment, you're locked in. And that's 100% true. Think about that. You go to Dell, you buy a machine, it shows up on your desk, you rack and stack it into your colo cabinets or into your cabinets in your data rooms. You're stuck with that machine for the next 5 to 7 years. Well, the opposite of that is, let's say, bare metal, where you buy a machine and you need a bigger one, you give that one back and you buy the bigger one, right? You can do that every other day if you'd like. There's no lock-in with regard to that. You also can take all that spend and move it on over to maybe managed cloud or disaster recovery as a service. It doesn't matter. You can move those funds as you need. We offer options with spend portability from one service to the other, giving you flexibility to meet the demands of the business today and tomorrow with no lock-in, right? So now you can contract for longer periods of time because you have options in the toolbox, and that will lower your costs immediately, right? Our hyperscale costs are creeping up and getting very expensive. I love this one, right? Because it's true, right? You think about, Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's favorite stock is not Apple, it's Coca-Cola. And why does he like Coca-Cola so much? He loves Coca-Cola because he'll tell you that 8 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola are served every single day. And if Coca-Cola needs to make their numbers or pay out dividends, all they got to do is raise the cost by 1 penny. And it's done. And that's why when you go to whatever your favorite gas station is, whether it's the Wawa or the Sheetz or the Quick Check or whatever it might be, and you buy a 20-ounce Diet Coke or Coca-Cola or Cherry Coke or whatever, it's $3, right? And the comedy of it is that the 2-liter is actually $2.50. But the problem with the 2-liter is it doesn't fit in the cup holder very well. But the moral of the story here is they have tremendous pricing power, but now we're comparing Coca-Cola to the largest companies on planet Earth. They have even more pricing power. So they can decide what this is going to cost today, and people are just going to have to pay it. So what we say is feel free to mix and match and put the right workloads on the right hypervisor. This includes moving workload from hyperscalers that are better served on lower cost platforms. We're not saying all of it. The stuff that makes fiscal sense to stay on, these hyperscalers, keep it there. The stuff that doesn't, move it. Connect it all together on one network, and now you get to enjoy the best of both worlds. So that's the idea. That's Platform DataBank. So we have another poll here for you. How is your organization approaching its future infrastructure and cloud strategy? You manage your hardware, meaning like you guys are doing all the work. Hybrid mix of hyperscaler and your hardware, right? So it's kind of in between. Hyperscale only, that's where we're going. Hosted infrastructure as a service, so like a DataBank cloud. We're still evaluating our future strategy. We're just trying to figure it out, right? Now, 2 more things. I'm going to hand it over to my counterpart. Is implementation and migration. We know that this is a risk for you. We've had an implementation and migration team for 10 years. These guys don't do physical migrations. They do virtual migrations, right? Because that's the harder part. A lot of IT people, they come into an industry or into an environment that they didn't put together. They don't know the applications, how they're all connected. They don't know the virtual infrastructure. They don't know any of that. So what this team does is they do app level migrations, they do slice level migrations, they do physical to virtual migrations, and they do all of it, none of it, or anything you don't want to do. The idea here is to really help lower risk in that migration, help our customers get to our platform in the lowest risk possible way. And the great part about this is these guys don't cost very much. We're not an MSP. The way this is to help our customers get on our platform, right? Security and compliance, obviously governance is key. This is a big thing. Anytime you think DataBank think security and compliance, it is our superpower. And that's all the way to FedRAMP moderate, CMMC level 2, HIPAA, PCI, ITAR, NIST, getting now into state ramp. Obviously, ISO is a thing for us. So we understand this well, and we can help be the easy button and also lower risk and lower cost because we're doing it at massive scale, right? So one last poll, which is, before I turn this over to Autumn, is poll number 3 here is, how are rising hardware costs impacting your projects? No impact. We have tons of money, doesn't bother us at all, right? We have to rescope or downsize. Like, we have to reconsider what we were going to do, what we designed for in 2025, because in 2026 our budget doesn't quite get us there because of costs of equipment, right? We're actively looking for alternatives. Or huge impact, all projects have been pushed, maybe to 2026 to see if we get any relief in the next 9 months or so. So excited to see what you guys say about that. All right, I'm going to hand off to Autumn. It is all you.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to share with you all some success stories that we've seen as far as people, customers of ours that were facing challenges and made the decision to get a flexible solution to solve their problems. So these are all real DataBank customers. You can, in fact, testimonials for these customers are on our website, and you can see them there. Check out the videos. So the first customer I want to talk about is a company called Innovate. They're a broadcasting company. They're actually the largest over-the-air broadcast distribution in the United States. And this was a customer. They were hosted in the public cloud prior to talking with DataBank. They were plagued with support challenges, availability challenges, and unpredictable bills. All common things that I think sometimes folks can see when they go into a hyperscale cloud, right? You need support, and here's the forum that you log into. Maybe you're on Twitter trying to find out what's happening with US East. You can't really call anyone unless you're paying a premium in order to get in touch, or maybe you're even leveraging a third party to help you support those workloads. The availability SLA, if you're in a single zone inside of any of the hyperscale providers, that GCP, Amazon, Azure, the standard SLA is 3 nines of availability. And I think most of us know that that's not an acceptable SLA for most of our business critical applications. And so in order to get a 5 nines of availability, which is more in line with the SLAs that businesses expect, you have to deploy into multiple zones, multiple availability zones. And that creates a lot of complexity in managing your application in order to do that. The other thing that can happen, and happened to this particular client, was an unplanned time that they needed to pull some data down from the public cloud. And then they got a nice bill for the egress fees when they extracted that data. And so all of those challenges led this customer to look for something else that gave them a better chance for success. And if you check out these testimonials, you'll see this particular customer, the implementation experience was very important, being able to migrate in, and Scott talked a little bit about that. But it's no small feat to take your systems from one place and move them to another. And it introduces risk, and it's always something that's very important to manage. This customer also is very big for them to get a US-based support structure, someone that they could get on the phone within a moment's notice whenever they had anything. Of course, the SLA was probably the most important piece for this particular customer, right? They needed to ensure the uptime, and they didn't want to necessarily have to do a bunch of complex things with their application to make it resilient. They wanted to host their systems on an infrastructure that was already resilient in nature. So, ultimately, this customer came and consumed a multi-tenant cloud environment within DataBank and found a lot of success in those areas. So, Scott, I think you can go ahead and go to the next one. So, this next success story is a company, Myers and Stauffer. They are a very large firm that supports government health and human services. So, they do have contracts with the government. And For any of those of you who have to deal with any specific compliance requirement, whether that's HIPAA, PCI, FedRAMP, CMMC, many of these, I think PCI has over 500 different controls they have to implement. I was actually surprised when I was looking this up today. I thought FedRAMP was going to be worse. FedRAMP only has 325 controls, at least for moderate, that you have to have implemented. And the bottom line is that when you have 300 or 500 things that you have to check off a list when it comes to your infrastructure, that's extremely challenging to manage. And so Scott alluded to this a little bit towards the end of his presentation, but DataBank has the capabilities within our government cloud to cover up to 80% of those controls for our clients. And for this particular client, that was a very important item. But it's important to note that that wasn't the only piece. When this webinar is about flexibility and is about choice. So if you go back to, where Scott had originally talked through the different pillars, this particular customer had a very large investment in a backup platform that they had already invested very heavily in. And so it was very challenging to say, we want to move, our hardware is older, right? But our backup platform is newer. And, my CFO is simply not going to let me throw that in the trash. So they contracted for a co-location environment in order to host their backup solution. And then we're able to fully connect that back both to their FedRAMP managed environment and the DataBank firewalls. They did choose a self-managed dedicated private cloud option that gave them the control over their virtual machines that they required, right? So when you looked at the stack that Scott had, they had a little from column A, a little bit from column C, and then they had that big line down at the bottom, which is disaster recovery. And this is one of the things that they talk about in their testimonials here, is that this is disaster recovery that actually works. And we see so often that customers sort of treat disaster recovery like a checkbox. Like, I told my board that I had it, or it says per this compliance framework that I'd have it. But one of the key features of the DataBank disaster recovery service is you have to test it. We test it when we set it up, and we test it annually. You can test it more often if you need to. And of course, if you have a dynamic environment, that may be very important. But, this customer said, it works. I failed it over. All of my systems actually work and actually run. And not only does that give you peace of mind, when you're supporting the government, it's a requirement. You've got to be able to prove that you can do that. So this is another success case that we see of someone that not only leveraged our compliance expertise, but they also were able to leverage a bulk of different services to meet their specific needs. So this one is about how VMware licensing changes and price increases have maybe influenced your infrastructure planning. So are you currently evaluating alternatives? Are you reviewing your contracts and your costs? Have you said, not right now. We haven't done anything. Hasn't impacted us yet, but we're keeping an eye on it. Or it actually hasn't impacted our environment, or just quite frankly, it hasn't impacted your environment because you don't use it. So, if you could pick one of those options, we love hearing your feedback about that. Um, and then it looks like we do have some questions. So I didn't know, are you going to tee those up, Dennis? Or
Um,
uh,
I certainly can if you want.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
So first, I just want to thank Scott and Autumn for their insight today. We definitely appreciate it, and we do have a couple questions. So the first question, do you use Fiber Cross Connects to integrate the two Proxmox and VMware environments?
I'm going to leave that to Autumn because you don't want the sales guy talking about that. That's how I get in trouble.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you actually for asking that. It's one thing that we probably didn't cover as much, but one of the key aspects of platform DataBank is our data center fabric. And so our network team has done a fantastic job of standing up a new data center fabric. And what that does is it actually enables us to do virtual cross connects across the infrastructure. All the networking on platform DataBank is at minimum 25 gigabits. And obviously, we can do multiple 25 gigabit links if we need to provide more throughput than that. So, all high speed connections. And this data center fabric can be used to connect to colocation. It can connect between different hypervisors. It can connect between a private cloud and a metal server. It is for facilitating all of the connectivity across those pillars.
And then the follow-up question is, how are latency issues addressed within the client and data center network uh, when the two are integrated?
So I think what you're kind of referencing there, we've just kind of really talked about the data center fabric and it being 25 gig, but many of our customers have multi-site deployments, which is a really key aspect, specifically if you're trying to address disaster recovery, whether that means you have a cold disaster recovery site, or maybe your co-location is in a facility that we don't currently have a cloud or a metal footprint. So we do also have a 100 gigabit MPLS backbone between all of our platform DataBank sites, and a variety of ways to connect our data centers together. I'm not sure if that quite answers your question, but really the high speed throughput of both the data center fabric and then the inner data center MPLS network are the key components in ensuring the performance and connectivity between these solutions.
And again, that concludes our webinar for today. We just want to thank everyone for joining, and thanks again for your time.